Hi everyone, it's the end of August and it's time to do some sowing again. This will be the final summer sowing. And there's actually still a few things that are important to get in now. So the difference between sowing now and sowing in spring is that once you've passed the summer solstice, the days are inevitably getting shorter. So instead of things being able to catch up with later sowings in spring, sowings now are important to get the timings right because there is no catching up later. So if you sow too late, it is too late. So you want to sow them at appropriate timings to be able to get big enough before the colder weather sets in. So what am I sowing? Maybe we should start talking about that instead. So I'm sowing herbs again. I'm sowing them once a month because especially dill and coriander tends to go to flower very quickly. So I'm sowing those two for harvesting before winter, and I will also sow them again next month. Parsley, it takes longer to go to seed, and I have successfully overwintered. Sorry, I'm just distracted because there's a big ant that's just caught a spider. Wow, like a flying ant? Okay, right, never mind. Oh my god, huge. Anyway, it's nature for you. Parsley I've successfully overwintered in the past, and because it takes longer to go to seed, they kind of last longer. So this might be the last sowing, though I might just do one next month just in case. They don't grow very fast during winter, but they will then, as soon as it starts warming up in spring, start producing lots of new shoots. And yeah, we'll see. And with them as well, I multi-sow these herbs, and I will also put in some radishes, breakfast radishes now, hoping that they will manage to crop before winter. So I don't like them too big and I don't like them too spicy. So the early spring sowings are fine, but then the later ones, they just go too big and too spicy too quick for me. So I'm going to try them now and I'll see if I can get a good crop. If so, I will keep doing it, but we'll see. So I multi-sow them as well. I think it's 4 seeds for these and then 3 seeds for the herbs, or maybe it's 5 for the radish and hoping for 4 to germinate. Yeah, let's do that. And then there'll be 3 for the herbs and hoping that 2 germinates per plant. So I'm going to sow those in a module tray like this. So there'll be 4 rows for each of those, and then in bigger tray I'm gonna just sprinkle lettuces in. So it's gonna be spinach as well, and pak choi, rocket lettuce, and 3 types of lettuce, and those are for pricking out later. But let's start with parsley. So parsley for me is always the last one to germinate. I don't know if that's just the way it is, but it's always been like that for me. The first one up is dill, and for me dill is usually the one that first goes to seed as well. So I tend to grow flat leaf parsley because that is more of what we use. The curly leafed parsley for me has a stronger flavor, but it's less good to use in dishes. I find, that's a preference. It just cuts up nicer into smaller bits. Like the curly parsley works quite well as decoration, or maybe like in salads. But yeah, so I prefer the flat leaf. So we'll do 3 each of those, and then label that parsley. And this is so that's just called plain leaf parsley. This is coriander cruiser, and I think it goes to seed very quickly, so I can't water all the time on my plot because there's no water supply. So I water things in maybe the first week before until they've established. So I'm not that surprised that they go to seed very quickly. But even when we had all this rain in June, the plantings out then have bolted really quickly. So I find coriander very tricky to grow. So you can let me know if that's the same for you, but I find I barely get one cropping from the plantings. And I really like coriander, so I would like it to be a bit more like parsley, where it's there, I can pick leaves several times whenever I need it. But it's just not worked out for me. And dill I don't use a lot, so I use that a lot less, so it doesn't matter that it goes to seed much quicker. And I think even though it goes to seed, you get enough dill off the plant. Whilst with the coriander, it kind of changes flavor once it's gone to seed, so it's not the same. Oh, that was way too many seeds there. That's a lot of dill. Alright, let's see if we can rescue that. Wet seeds and wet fingers, difficult. So I sow my seeds into a mix of general compost. I make my own seed mix basically. So general compost mixed with either vermiculite or perlite, which makes the compost less rich. And that is what seeds want. They don't want the super nutritious stuff. They want it to be a bit poorer to grow. And you can even do it in pure perlite. So what that does is it gives more air for the roots to form and improves drainage. It's one of the major things that kills seedlings is too much water. So you really want to avoid that. So then I water the tray before sowing. So this compost is already saturated, and that takes a very short time. I just plonk the tray in a bigger tray of water and just let it sit there for like 10-15 minutes, depending on if this compost is completely bone dry. It takes longer because it sort of repels water, but now it's been quite wet, so it's still good. It's still moist, so it's absorbed the water very quickly. So that was radish. Breakfast. What's it called? French breakfast, is it? Yeah, French breakfast. I think that one's my favorite radish, I'd say. Breakfast radish. Right, and then just push the seeds in so that they're in contact with the compost. And then you just want to sprinkle some more compost on top. It needs to be very, very shallow. So the rule of thumb is that the width of the seed is the depth that it needs. And some seeds even germinate best in full light, so you can't actually cover them. So it's good to know which ones that is. So I think mainly that's celery and celeriac and maybe even basil. Alright, so that's now firmed in. I'm going to keep this in my house because it has a constant temperature, and that's the best for germination. It is just outside, it's just can be super hot in the sun and then quite cold in the evenings, and just you speed up germination by having a constant warmth. It doesn't need to be hot, but it needs to be warm. So put that to the side. Right. So my ambition this year is to have continuous salad crop through the year. So I sow at certain points during the year, and this is the late summer sowing, and these will grow outside and keep cropping for quite a while. I will also sow some in September, and they will be grown under cover, either in the greenhouse during the winter, or they will be outside but covered with fleece. So they will grow really slowly during winter, but there will be some leaves to crop from until I can plant out the spring sowings next year. That's my goal anyway. So for this sowing now, it will include just some lettuces that I have, and it will also be my first sowing this year of rocket. This is wild rocket, because if I sow it in spring, it just goes to seed immediately, and it's also severely attacked by flea beetle. So wild rocket can easily overwinter. I'm also sowing pak choi, because again, it's sowing it now means I can avoid some of the worst pests. Pests love this stuff, and also it produces better crop in a slightly cooler temperature. And the spinach I sowed in spring, early spring, it's still bolted almost immediately. I guess we had a really warm spring, and even though I tried to water it, just the temperatures were so warm. So for me, this will hopefully now be my successful sowing of spinach. Yeah, so what I do with the salads is that I sprinkle them on top. Sometimes I do it in a seed tray, just do rows for pricking out, but I only have 6 different types of seeds to sow today, so I'm going to do it in one of these. I'm just sprinkle them out, and then once they're up big enough that I can handle them, I prick them out into individual modules and grow them on until 3 true leaves to 5 true leaves, and then I plant them out in the bed where they're going to grow on. So this spinach is spinach medania, it's called. And yeah, it was very tasty, the stuff I got before it bolted. So it's tempting to sow too many, as always. Of course you want enough, but it's just so sad to throw plants away that I just try not to over sow. Right. So that was spinach, and you must remember to label. Though spinach is probably one of the easier one to recognize from this lot. And pak choi, again I'll prick these out, and this year I will try to grow them not under mesh, and we'll see how they get on. If it's just atrocious, I'll have to amend that for next year. Alright. Should be enough. So, don't use lots of pak choi, but it would be nice to be able to grow it myself. And next year I'm going to try to grow more oriental greens, I think, because I quite like them. They're very good for cooking. They keep their texture quite well. So it's pak choi. Then this is an F1 variety called Green Revolution, which I haven't grown before. But F1 after seeds means that they are bred so that you cannot save the seeds from these. They won't. I mean, you can save them, but if you try to grow from those saved seeds, they won't come true to that plant. They're not open pollinated, basically. So this is rocket. So there's a cultivar which is salad rocket, which is different from this. This is the wild rocket, so this is a perennial and will come back. You can pull it and plant again in spring, and so I'll see what they're like next year. But to me, spring and rocket doesn't really it doesn't really go well. I just end up with flea beetles just munching all the leaves, and that's fine, you know. Flea beetles love other brassicas, but because you eat the leaves of the rocket, it's not that nice. I know you can grow rocket in spring successfully under mesh, but there's just so much stuff I grow under mesh that I try to limit it, and I'm not the biggest fan of rockets, so for me it's not worth the effort. But if you really want nice rocket leaves throughout the year, spring, summer as well, you know, the trick is to grow it under mesh. And this is a lettuce, Lobjoit's green cos. Well, it's a green cos, basically. I can never pronounce it. So this one is a very good producer for me. It's never any issues. I don't love it, but it's reliable, and it gives you lots of green. So, and I have lots of seeds. I don't know why I have so many of these packets. This never-ending supply, and you can use it to just pick the outer leaves from it, which is what I normally do. It will head up after a while, so you can also grow them like that, and it's kind of like it looks a little bit like a big romaine the way it heads up. And then I have this, which is yes, I got free with Gardener's World magazine. So it's a mixed bag of lettuce seeds, and it contains quite a lot of good ones. Let's see. So that's quite fun, actually. You never really know what you're gonna get, specifically when you grow it like this and you prick it out. That's what it is. The green pot. Don't forget to label. And some of them in here are some of my favorite salads, so I'm hoping I get a good selection this time as well. This is the third sowing of lettuce, I think, for me. Yeah, should be. So I don't know if you can see that, but there's lots of different colors of the seeds. So I might sow a bit more of those just to make sure I get a good selection. You can sort of tell the different varieties even at seedling stage, or I should say you can tell that they are different from each other. I couldn't say that I could pick which one was which. Alright, and the last one is another free seed. I think I got this with another order, but you know, lettuce seed. Yeah, this one was pretty good as well. Robust and reliable mid-sized iceberg lettuce. So this is the one that keeps heading up for me. I keep picking the outer leaves, you know, but they are very persistent at heading up, and I've never had any ambitions to grow iceberg lettuce, but it's actually quite tasty. It is quite funny. It's free seeds to get stuff that you maybe would never buy yourself, but there's no harm in growing it. Sorry about that. They are harvesting all the cereal crops around here, and I think that's the machine they run to put it into the silo or whatever. Right, that's it. So that's... Oh, and I forgot to label these. Well, that was the mixed one. Talking too much. Mixed. Next, green. And that was the, what was it called again? Iceberg. Right. Let's firm it down again. Right, and then we're gonna just spread some on top. And even if you can see some of the seeds poking out, it's not a problem. You know, if you think about how it's happening naturally, there's no one there just checking seed depth before things germinate. You know, they will germinate. The biggest mistake you can make is to drown them. And if you don't get any germination at all, and you haven't overwatered, and you've kept them in a nice temperature, it's the seed. It's the seed that's the problem. Don't blame yourself. Just get better seed next time. Alright, that's it. And again, I will keep these in the house until they've germinated. And as soon as they're big enough to handle, when their two first leaves come out, I don't wait until the true leaves are there. I do them as soon as they're big enough to handle. The smaller the root, to a point, you want the root maybe to be this long. If it's shorter than that, it won't be that easy to prick out. If it's longer than that and it started branching, you're more likely to damage the root. So if it's, you want to prick them out when they've still got one long root. And then it's much easier and a fast job. And once you've pricked them out, they start growing immediately. There's no checking. And then when you want to transplant them out, sorry, I just got a phone call when I was filming. I'm using my phone, so it just cut out the video. But what I was saying was that when you're planting out your seedlings after they've been pricked out and they started growing again, when they get to the 3 to 5 leaf true leaf stage, it's a good time to plant them into their final position. And then again, that's a good size because then they can just establish and start growing. If you wait longer when they're bigger, they will probably have filled up the little module that you've grown them in, and they will start to run out of nutrients and also maybe become a bit leggy. And then they will really be checked. So the transplant shock, like it's called, will then be quite apparent. So it's good to try to get those timings right. And one of the main issues that I have is that you have to have the space free in the bed when they are ready. If you really don't have the space and they have grown too big in the little modules, it's better than to repot them into a bigger pot with more compost and let them grow on like that. It's not the best way, but it's a way to limit any setbacks, basically. So I hope you've enjoyed that. It's just me again sowing some seeds. I feel like I do this every month at least. This is now end of August, and we're definitely coming to the end of the year, but there will definitely be an uptake again with more seeds specifically, or raw beans or sweet peas or garlic and maybe onion sets that you want to sow. That's all to come before the winter, so don't feel like it's over yet. There's still quite a bit to do. And I'm gonna leave you there, and I hope you enjoyed it. Happy growing.